Now via Zoom is security analyst Jacob Lappin, host of the Lappin Assessment. Good evening to you, Jacob.
Hi.
So we're already 2 weeks into this. President Trump saying the U.S. ready to do what needs to be done to support the protesters. But now the tone seems to be shifting a bit. Is Washington, you think, stepping back or just trying to buy time or create a little mystery?
I think it's a matter of creating a deliberate fog to keep the Iranians guessing. And the United States, the Pentagon, CENTCOM, they do require time to move the military assets into place. We've got reports of the Abraham Lincoln carrier group moving towards the Middle East from the South China Sea. There is going to need to be significant and serious military planning in order to cover all of the contingencies. And then that raises the question of, what will be the goal of these strikes? Will it be to signal to the Iranian people that they have help? Are they going to be widespread? Will they be aimed at toppling the regime? Every one of these options is going to be presented to President Trump by his security team, by the Pentagon, by the U.S. military. And I think that President Trump, what he's looking to do here is to send a message without getting dragged into a lengthy missile war with the Iranians. And in order to do that, the military pieces have to be put into place. Now, in the meantime, we're hearing sort of signals, hints, that the Iranians are cooperating with American demands, holding off executions. There's less violence on the street. That's mainly because the massacres have been so horrific and wide scale that they've succeeded partially in their goal, according to a number of reports, of pushing back the protesters into their homes out of pure fear for their lives. So there's a lot of fog here right now. We don't know what Trump's move is going to be, but what we do know is that the pieces are being put into place for significant military action. We know that Israel is preparing. The chief of staff visited an Arrow air defense battery. Arrow is the key air defense system that served us so well in the June war. It's no wonder that Germany is buying it as well to protect itself against Russia. So all the military pieces are being put into place, and we'll have to see what the decision is going to be. But I think there's a deliberate fog here.
Also, according to the New York Times, Prime Minister Netanyahu was also asking the president to postpone a military attack, which seems kind of ironic. What do you think the reason for that would be?
Well, again, I can't, speculate too much on these reports because we simply don't know what the real communication is, and it wouldn't be the first time, by the way, that we don't know what Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump are saying to each other behind closed doors about potential action with Iran. So I think we have to be humble, but I think that what is happening is that Israel is communicating its security perspective, its security needs to the United States. It wants to be taken into account. So I think that makes sense. This is how allies operate. And again, at the end of the day, I think President Trump is going to have to make a decision about what the goal of the strikes is going to be. And he's going to hear from his team about the costs and benefits, the risks of hitting many targets versus limited targets. It's not a simple hit and run operation. It never will be against a country like Iran that has missiles that can target U.S. bases, that is a stubborn adversary. It's going to take a lot of military planning, and the U.S., their military planning is extremely serious. So I think that is the main reason why we're seeing a delay, not necessarily because there's been a change of heart, but we're going to have to be patient and see where this goes.
Right. And the protests, we, as you mentioned, have seemingly subsided. But again, we're limited in what we're able to see coming out of Iran. But it seems that people still are fired up. It'll be interesting. What do you reckon the next few days could look like as we're getting into the weekend?
I think it's safe to say that Iran's never going to be the same again. You have this degree of carnage, and the Iranian people saw that this evil regime of jihadists, not only did it waste all of their national treasure on failed proxy wars and failed direct wars against Israel, against the West, against the United States, against moderate Sunni countries, they saw that all that went to waste. They saw they didn't have water in their taps. They saw that the rial was out of control and their economy was collapsing. That brought them out into the streets. Now they see that this regime is willing to mass murder, to commit mass murder, to stay in power. It has zero interest in listening to them. It has no answers for them. And I think, the regime is never going to be the same again. But again, we have to be humble because this is not a science. And so I'm staying clear of any clear-cut predictions. It's going to go one way or the other. We have in the Middle East, we have got to be humble and see where things go patiently because there are so many different factors at work here at the same time.
All right. Thank you very much, Yaakov Lapin. Much appreciated as always.
Sure.
Yaakov Lapin, he's joining us on Zoom. He's our security analyst. You know, from a security standpoint, Yaakov, what would Hamas disarmament actually have to look like for Israel to consider this credible? And does what's being discussed meet that bar?
So I'll give you a description of what it would look like, but I'll just preface by saying this is not going to happen. It's clearly not going to happen because the moment that Hamas does what I'm about to describe, it's not going to be Hamas anymore. It won't be a jihadist organization whose top priority is the destruction of Israel in the name of their fundamentalist Islamic vision. So what they would have to do to actually disarm is blow up their tunnels, destroy their weapons manufacturing facilities, give up all of their rocket launchers, give up all of their automatic rifles, give up their IEDs. You know, Gaza has probably more IEDs per square kilometer than anywhere on Earth. We're talking about massive amounts of arms. They're not going to do that, Natasha. What they're going to try and do is exactly what Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon, just as Balir alluded to. It's going to be a show of disarmament. You may see a truck, a pickup truck with some Kalashnikovs, some AK-47s, and they'll say, look, we've disarmed. And then you'll have the Qataris and the Turks celebrating this and using their social media bots. This is a trap. This is a big trap for Israel because the goal of this is to buy time, buy legitimacy, and let Hamas retake the whole of the Gaza Strip. And I very much assume, that Israel is not going to play along with this forever.
All right. You know, of course, the plan leans heavily on technocratic governments and local Palestinian policing. Without the IDF inside Gaza, who realistically is going to enforce security if Hamas elements are still there, as you're saying?
Nobody. And that's exactly the catch-22. That's the paradox that we're in. The rule of thumb, if we want to understand how these arenas work, whether it's Gaza or Lebanon, is those with the firepower, let's call it a supremacy, or those with the most amounts of firepower, they have the final say, including politically as well. So they may step back from being the official government. We saw what Hezbollah was doing up until this war, running Lebanon on behalf of Iran. This is exactly what Hamas plans to do in the Gaza Strip, and they will use their executions, their regime of terror, and their ongoing project to brainwash the next generation of Gazans, which they've already begun doing, by the way, in the 50% of Gaza that they do control. We can already see this happening. They will use it to keep this war going against Israel's very existence. So as long as the current status quo is as it is, there will be no room for any real political alternative. But if the IDF uproots militarily what's left of Hamas, then I think there is a lot of room for political alternatives, and then the situation will be transformed.
All right. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us, Yaakov,
Sure.
with, that update on the security situation in Gaza.
That we're joined by security analyst and host of the Lapin Assessment, Yaakov Lapin. Good to have you with us, Yaakov. So it's the first time the Houthi leader has been seen in at least 2 months. Do you think that's linked to what's going on in Iran?
Absolutely. I think that the Houthis are in big trouble. Their chief state sponsor, Iran, is unstable, and they don't know in the long term if the regime is going to survive. And of course, Iran is responsible for supplying them with missiles, with funds, with training. In other words, without the support of Iran, the Houthis will shrivel up and be a shadow of their former selves. So that alarms them. And certainly I think that they're also signaling that if there's any strike on Iran, they will stand with their sponsor. Now, to make matters worse, Israel is closing in on them in Somaliland. Apparently, we haven't had any final confirmation. We have to be careful. We don't know for sure whether Israel is going to set up an intelligence base, a naval base, a logistics base. But I think it's fair to assume that Israel is going to be exploring that option because Israel cannot tolerate Iran and its proxies shutting off the Red Sea for maritime traffic, basically placing the port of Eilat under a closure. It cannot tolerate ballistic missiles being fired at Israeli cities whenever the Houthis want to act like an Iranian proxy. And so the Houthis are looking around and they're seeing their situation get worse, both because of Iran and because of Israel's bold strategic steps in their neighborhood. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing them trying to come out and basically show a strong image. But I think that they know that their situation is not very good at all.
Yaakov, thank you. We appreciate it. Yaakov Lapin there.
Sure.
For more insight, we're joined by security analyst Yaakov Lapin. Look, Yaakov, at this point, what do we know? How widespread is this IDF activity in Lebanon? What's being targeted?
Well, right now, it looks like it's routine enforcement, and this has really been going on all week. We've hardly had a day where the IDF hasn't struck in southern Lebanon, also in the Bekaa Valley in recent days. This is all about detecting intelligence of Hezbollah violating the ceasefire, rebuilding its military infrastructure, and targeting it. And the targets are usually weapons warehouses. They're usually attempts to set up forward positions, using villages and homes as weapons storage facilities. So it's both weapons production and weapons storage. And it's often training as well. And we know that Hezbollah has actually turned much more to domestic weapons production because they're finding it so hard to smuggle weapons through their traditional route through Syria. So I would look at this as routine enforcement. It's something that we've grown very used to over the past year. And this is really, in many ways, the new normal.
There's a lot of attention on this issue of Hezbollah. Even last week, I mean, the Lebanese armed forces are claiming they're making progress against Hezbollah's vast arsenal infrastructure. And we even saw the government take a hard line on the visiting Iranian foreign minister this week, if I'm not mistaken, a top Iranian official in Beirut, telling them essentially, back off, find another way. I think they put it in various terms in terms of their support for Hezbollah. What do you read from the Lebanese state vis-a-vis, Israel's efforts to go after Hezbollah?
Well, look, the Lebanese state talks a good game. They're saying the right thing. They're saying that Hezbollah has to be disarmed. They're saying that Lebanon has to be demilitarized except for the official Lebanese armed forces. But when it comes, again, to actions on the ground, what we're seeing is more of a show, a sort of symbolic, theatrical disarmament. We're not seeing real disarmament. And the reason that we know that is because the Lebanese army is not going house to house in southern Lebanon. It's not showing us photos of massive weapons caches. It is going through villages and sort of symbolically, dotting their I's, crossing their T's, showing the occasional weapons, very small quantities that they've captured. And it wouldn't surprise me, by the way, if this was done in coordination with Hezbollah. We have to remember that the Lebanese army, 50% of it is Shiite officers, Shiite soldiers. So at the end of the day, the Lebanese army would rather do anything than find itself in a civil war with Hezbollah. And so they're making a show to please the Trump administration, but they're not really disarming Hezbollah. It's Israel that's enforcing this ceasefire, not the Lebanese government.
I think in line with the, honest expectations of Israelis as well. Yaakov Lapin, thanks for being with us. Well.